Novak Djokovic is one of the greatest tennis players of all time. It's generally understood right now, based on how many majors they have, or Grand Slams as they're called in tennis, that it's either Novak Djokovic, Roger Federer, or Rafael Nadal. Those are the three that are in the GOAT conversation. Now, Nadal just won a 21st major. Federer and Djokovic have 20, respectively. Each one of them has 20. They were all tied at 20 for a while. Nadal just won the Australian Open, which, arguably makes him the GOAT. He now has probably the best claim to GOAT status. It gets a little bit complicated because then you got to look at how many regular tournaments did they win versus how many majors, and so you can make an argument, even if you have fewer majors but you have more regular tournament wins, that maybe you're the GOAT if you value the regular tournaments, a little more. If somebody has 10 or 20 more regular tournament wins but one less major, who's the GOAT? It's a little bit subjective, but there is also some objectivity in the conversation. So Djokovic recently went through the giant scandal with the Australian Open, where he nominally was cleared to come to the country to play in the Australian Open. He shows up there, they detain him. He gets rejected from going into the country. Why? Because he never got vaccinated. He had an exemption, but then when they looked into the specifics of the exemption, and by the way, different factions of the Australian government went back and forth on this. So I think it was the Prime Minister who said, we're kicking you out. And then it was a judge or judges that said, actually, no, he's allowed to stay. And then it was like the immigration minister or something that said at the last second, no, we're going to kick you out. So he didn't get vaccinated. He did just have COVID recently, though, and he beat COVID, and so he has natural immunity, but they don't count natural immunity the same as vaccine immunity. Now, in my opinion, I don't like that. I think you can count natural immunity the same as vaccine immunity. Some studies say it's even better. If you're lucky enough to survive COVID, then having the natural immunity works just as good, if not better, than the vaccine immunity. But I think the main reason they ended up kicking him out was that he lied on his form about traveling to other countries before going to the Australian Open. So he said, I haven't traveled to countries in the past 14 days or whatever it was. And he did. There was video of him on social media being in a number of different places. He even did events while he had COVID. Like, he did an interview and did some other things while he had COVID, which is wildly reckless. So they made the claim, look, you're a threat to public safety. We're going to kick you out. I don't buy the claim he's a threat to public safety. He already had COVID. He beat COVID. He has natural immunity. But if you want to be a stickler for the technical rules, then you could say, yeah, well, you broke a rule by lying to us about where you had been, and so we're going to kick you out. Anyway, that's a long way of saying there was a huge debate about whether or not he should be allowed in the country. Well, and to play the Australian Open. So now he's come out and he's speaking for the first time about this topic. So everybody's curious what he has to say. He sat down for an interview. Let's see what he had to say, and then I'm going to react.
Have you received any vaccination against COVID?
I have not.
Why?
I understand that and support fully the freedom to choose, whether you want to get vaccinated or not. And I have not spoken about this before, and I have not disclosed my medical record and my vaccination status because I had the right to keep that private and discreet. But as I see, there's a lot of wrong conclusions and assumptions out there. I think it's important to speak up about that and justify certain things, right? So I was never against vaccination. I understand that globally, everyone is trying to put a big effort into handling this virus and seeing hopefully an end soon to this virus. And vaccination is probably the biggest effort that was made. Probably half of the planet was vaccinated. And I fully respect that. But I've always represented and always supported the freedom to choose what you put into your body. And for me, that is essential. It's really the principle of understanding what is right and what is wrong for you. And me as an elite professional athlete, I've always carefully reviewed, assessed everything that comes in from the supplements, food, the water that I drink, or sports drinks, anything really that comes into my body as a fuel, based on all the informations that I got, I decided not to take the vaccine as of today.
So do you have, as of today?
Yes, I keep my mind open because we are all trying to find collectively a best possible solution to end COVID, right? I mean, no one really wants to be in this kind of situation that we've been in collectively for 2 years. I'm part of a sport, a very global sport that is played every single week in a different location. So, I understand the consequences of my decision. And one of the consequences of my decision was not going to Australia, and I was prepared not to go. And I understand that not being vaccinated today, I'm unable to travel to most of the tournaments at the moment.
And that's a price you're willing to pay?
That is the price that I'm willing to pay.
Ultimately, are you prepared to forego the chance to be the greatest player that ever picked up a racket, statistically, because you feel so strongly about this jab?
Yes. I do.
But as things stand, if this means that you miss the French Open, is that a price you'd be willing to pay?
Yes, that is the price that I'm willing to pay.
And if it means that you miss Wimbledon this year, again, that's a price you're willing to pay?
Yes.
Why, Novak? Why?
Because the principles of decision-making on my body are more important than any title or anything else. I'm trying to be in tune with my body as much as I possibly can.
What do you say directly to anti-vaccination campaigners around the world who proudly declare Novak Djokovic is one of us?
I say that everyone has the right to choose to act or say whatever they feel is appropriate for them. And I have never said that I'm part of that movement.
Wow. So this is really interesting, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. At the end there, he sort of tries to distance himself a little bit from the anti-vaccine movement, even though he's saying, like, I'm not going to get the vaccine. I don't want to get the vaccine. That's interesting to me. I don't know, because clearly he has the courage of his convictions, which is why he's like, look, I'll sacrifice being the GOAT. I'll sacrifice going to most of the tournaments to not get the vaccine. So clearly he has an ideological position here where he's like, I am against the vaccine. But he's also saying to the anti-vaccine movement, like, I never said I was with you guys. I don't know if that's to try to save face publicly, or I don't know if he thinks there are too many cranks in the anti-vaccine movement where they say, like, there's a microchip in the thing, and he knows that's not true. He doesn't want to be associated with them. He also stresses the bodily autonomy angle. There are plenty of anti-vaccine people who go beyond that and say, not only do I not want to get the vaccine, I will literally, like, there was a story from a while ago now, 6-7 months ago, where, like, anti-vaccine protesters tore down, like, a vaccine site. Like, they ripped down the tent and did a bunch of stuff. I don't know if he sees that and he says that goes too far. I just support the bodily autonomy. But it's interesting that he's ideologically clearly opposed to the vaccine, but he's like, I'm not with the anti-vaxxers. Okay, so take that for what it's worth. But, man, 3 out of the 4 majors are saying you cannot play in them unless you're vaccinated. 3 out of the 4. So it's Wimbledon, the Australian Open, and the French Open. I think the U.S. is the only one at the moment that you're allowed to play if you're not vaccinated. He's saying, I'll forego 3 of the 4 majors, and I'll forego most of the regular tournaments to not get vaccinated. Woo. So on the one hand, I just sort of want to put my arm around him and try to convince him that, bro, you're going to be okay if you get the vaccine. Like, is there a tiny percentage of people who have, like, very negative side effects from the vaccine? Yes, there are. That's the same thing with any medical intervention. But the overwhelming majority, over 99% of the people who get the vaccine are fine. And it helps them. Again, it gives you over a 90% protection from severe illness, hospitalization, and death. So if you get COVID and you're vaccinated, you are much less likely to have a severe case of it. Now, the vaccine might give you some minor side effects. Like when I had my first shot, I had a little bit of a headache, but I got over it very quickly. When I had my second shot, I was fine. I had no side effects at all. It was interesting. So originally I got the Johnson & Johnson, which was the one and done shot. Evidence came out that was like the least effective of the vaccine, so I decided to get a booster. I got a Moderna. So I did like the mix and match thing. I had no side effects at all from the Moderna. And look, I'm fine. In fact, I told the story before. Sagar and Jetty had COVID. Crystal had just did a show with Sagar. And they were like 3 feet away the entire show, talking right at each other. And this was back when it was Delta, which was the worst strain that we know of so far of COVID. Crystal should have gotten it, and then she should have passed it on to me. And Crystal didn't get it, and I didn't get it. I think that's a good example of like the vaccine probably worked. Now, look, that's an anecdote, but you don't need anecdotes. Go to the macro situation. French study of over 20 million people. Vaccines protect against severe illness, hospitalization, and death over 90%. So I just like... I want to help him out. Like, I want to talk to him and try. I'll show you the graphs. I'll show you the charts. I'll show you, like, here's how well the vaccine is working. Even if you grant all of the anti-vaccine arguments based on the data, like, oh, look at the VAERS program and stuff. Even if you grant that, the side effects of getting COVID, the downsides of getting COVID are way worse. So even if you grant people everything in that VAERS program, which you shouldn't, but even if you do, you should still get the vaccine. Like, I want to try to convince these people. I want to try to convince them, especially because in his instance, it changes history. Like, it literally changes history if he doesn't play in 3 of the 4 majors, if he can't play in most of the tennis tournaments, because he is sacrificing his real chance of becoming a GOAT. Rafa now already has 21 majors. The French Open is coming up. The French Open, Rafa owns the French Open. It's played on clay, and Rafael Nadal is the best on clay. And so he's like the favorite every time he plays the French Open. Like, he's going to be 2 majors ahead of you, and you're going to be behind the 8 ball. For what? For what? So on the one hand, I want to convince him. But then on the other hand, look, and maybe you guys won't agree with this part of it. I don't know. But even though he's wrong about the vaccine, and he should get it, and it would help him against severe illness, hospitalization, and death, and they're very unlikely to be big downsides to it, there is something that's sort of respectable about this, in the sense that he has the courage of his convictions so much that he's like, maybe I won't be the GOAT, even though I'm right there. I'm in the conversation, I'm right there, but I'm willing to forego it. Now, the final point I'll make is, when he says, look, I support personal freedom and bodily autonomy. Okay, look, I get it. You guys know my perspective on the vaccine mandate. I think we need to try our best to balance individual rights, personal freedom, with the well-being of the community and the collective. I think anybody, especially if you're politically on the left, I think you need to find a way to balance both of those things that we value deeply. Because I care deeply about the community and the collective and the well-being of everybody, but I also care about individual freedom and bodily autonomy and all that stuff. So I'm against a hard vaccine mandate that's too authoritarian, but I like effectively what's called the soft mandate, which is like vaccinate or test. So that's my personal choice on it. He clearly is on the side of not even that. I don't even want to do that, which is just more of a basic regulation and not an authoritarian overreach. He says he supports personal freedom and bodily autonomy. I just want to ask him, so do you support the legalization of all drugs? Because if you support personal freedom and bodily autonomy, then you should support legalization of all drugs. Me personally, you guys know, I want to legalize, tax, and regulate drugs. There are certain ones that, with certain additives, that I would regulate out of existence because they're too dangerous and they're deadly, like fentanyl, for example. But if he's being consistent, he'd say, no, even legal fentanyl should be good. Okay, if you believe in personal freedom and bodily autonomy, you can put whatever you want in your body. Drink Clorox if you want. What about abortion? What are Novak's thoughts on abortion? If you really believe in personal freedom and bodily autonomy, all right, well, let's follow that through to its logical conclusion. Or is it just in the realm of this vaccine? So I don't know. But also notice, there wasn't much chatter about vaccines previously. Like in the US, to go to a public school, you have to have all these different vaccines. And nobody really said anything about it or cared. They just thought it was par for the course. It's just a medical thing. Now all of a sudden with one vaccine, people are like, flipping out. So it's a bunch of weird different nuances to this conversation. But look, man, all I'll say is I would like to see him play in all the majors and play in the tournaments because I want to see history unfold where it's a fair fight between, Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic. And by the way, Federer had a terrible injury, and he hasn't played in a while. I don't know when he's coming back. So it's really just Djokovic and Nadal at the moment vying for that GOAT status, and Djokovic is sort of bowing out here. So actually, I lied when I said final point before. Final point. Look, I beg the French government and the Australian government and the UK government, for the love of God, do a vaccinator test policy. Don't change history for a bullheaded authoritarian approach. Don't do it. Like, just let him take a test when he comes to the country, and if he doesn't have COVID, let him play in the event. Is that really such a bad idea? And also, like I said, he had COVID, he beat it, he has natural immunity. Some countries recognize natural immunity like it's vaccine immunity, as you should. But for whatever reason, a lot of countries don't. And I honestly think that's anti-science. It is a pro-science position to say if you had it and you beat it, you have natural immunity, you're not really, it's okay. You're okay. So clearly I'm filled to the brim with thoughts on this, but there you have it. This is the first time he's speaking out, and man, is that some claim. I'll sacrifice GOAT status. I'll sacrifice my career just to not get vaccinated. Make of that whatever you will. Ever since Adpocalypse, when YouTube defunded all independent news and politics overnight, we haven't trusted them. We know they can pull the rug out from underneath us at any time. If you enjoy this content, please consider tipping $1 or $2 per month on the Secular Talk Patreon. Link in the video description box below. Thanks for your support.